following program on Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations.
Tonight, we discuss the laws surrounding police and their authority in Sri Lanka. Are the nation's policing standards up to global norms, or are there changes required to key legislature governing this institution? A very good evening, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight on Law, Land and Liberty, where we bring to you key legal topics and break it down for the layman. Now, tonight's topic is something that we haven't previously touched on the program in the past, and that's on the police and its functioning in Sri Lanka. What is this institution capable of, and where does the authority lie, and how exactly are the general public responsible in answering to the police, and what calls does the police answer to in return? But to talk about this very complicated topic and also recent developments as well, especially considering the global aspects, we have with us someone that is not a new face on the show, and that is Dr. Udara Soysa, attorney at law. So thank you very much once again for coming back onto the program and enlightening our viewers on this very convoluted topic and giving us some clarity on its recent amendments as well. A little bit of an introduction on Dr. Udara Soysa. He is a lecturer in charge for postgraduate programs on public international law at the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies. So we will be seeing a lot of global inputs that we can actually draw in from and see the comparisons to the global stage and Sri Lanka's current context as well. But before we go into the actual topic, here's a bit of a breakdown on how we're going to approach this entire discussion. First, we'll be talking about the fundamentals, where exactly the legislature is enshrined. Next, we'll be talking about the current context and how we have seen developments in recent times. And finally, we'll be talking about potential needs for reforms and the fundamental advancements for the future. All right, well, without any further ado, let's get right into the depths of this topic. So once again, thank you very much. Doctor, might I correct? I think it's important for us to get a bit of a basic understanding into the actual topic in itself before we get into any of the current contexts and the key specifics. So, sir, if you could explain to us the structure of the policing system within the country and also how it compares on a global front to other countries like maybe our neighbor India or even the USA.
First of all, thank you so much for having me in your show. I know technically you could invite numerous lawyers within the police department, and I think one of the points of you inviting me is to give a bit of an unbiased outside view and of a more of a global comparison context with my background. So again, thank you to you and Derana TV for this opportunity. So in terms of understanding how the policing structure works in Sri Lanka when as compared to US or India, you have to understand the constitutional nature of the countries. Sri Lanka is in reality a unitary state, whereas United States and India both can be deemed constitutionally as federal states. So when you compare in Sri Lanka, we have a unitary system, a unitary legal system where the entire state apparatus, whether it's policing or postal department or all departments function under one line of control. So you can see within Sri Lanka you have a you have a situation where we have like numerous police stations around the country, and you have officer in charge, and under him you have often several other sub officers in charge when it comes with it's miscellaneous or crime, traffic, etc. And as you go up, yes, HQI, or then we have the SSP divisions, then we have DIG areas, DIG ranges, and ultimately, the entire structure is controlled on the top by the Inspector General of the Police. So you see, constitutionally, you see a very much of a unitary system. This is why you have situations where you get, let's say that you get caught drinking and driving, going from Derana to your house. I know you don't, right? But suppose that happened, perhaps you know the city traffic DIG or maybe the DIG from the Western Range. You take a call and you give, here, this is a DIG, let me go. So this kind of options are available because of this centralized system where is a sub-inspector at a DUI, drinking under influence station, or even a OIC there or a sergeant there will never try to risk his career over trying to fact report, try to arrest you and fact report you. So you can see this structure in Sri Lanka. So ultimately, considerable amount of power over the lower ranks is exercised by the higher ups within the context.
Exactly.
However, if I may go further, in US and in India also you can see, but you have to understand the difference in the federal system. You cannot say the US police arrested me, right? It's the state, each of the 50 states have their own police. Now, for example, if you are a New York, from the New York state, if you are a police officer from New York state, for you to cross your border to go to either Maryland or New Jersey, you need the permission from the police units in New Jersey. The jurisdiction where the Sri Lankan police have a national jurisdictions where you can go and arrest a suspect from Colombo, maybe even in Jaffna, where when it comes to US police, UC is different. It is each state has its own structure. Every 50 states have they contain their own police departments. So, for example, if you are in Maryland, there's nothing that New York police or the New Jersey police or Florida police can do, right? In fact, within the state, you also have the state police, and you also have the county policing as well. Right? I think in our last discussion about the Trump's assassination, we discussed sometimes how this coordination, lack of coordination between each of these police units may cause problems. And suppose that you are a serial killer and you are doing killings in different areas in US. For example, let's say you are a trucker who's operating a truck and who you are driving through the interstate from, let's suppose interstate 20, you are traveling perhaps from Georgia all the way across to California, perhaps, right? So hundreds of kilometers, miles trip. You've been killing a lot of people around these areas. So now the problem, now one police area might struggle to investigate this kind of situations. You have the FBI coming into play. You have a multi-jurisdictional matter when you get the help from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So in India as well, similar. So Tamil Nadu has its own police where different states like Gujarat or Maharashtra, they have their own policing. And if this matter is beyond the scope of the individual state police, you give the matter to the Central Bureau of Investigation to do a multi-pronged or multi-facet investigation across the state. So you have to understand there are advantages and disadvantages in all this. Now, in terms, if you look at US, I've lived considerable period of my life in US. It's very difficult to influence the policing at the ground. For example, if you are caught within, let's say, a driving offense or any other drug offenses in an interstate from the highway patrol. So they have for the highway, the state policing has a unit called highway patrol. So they are focused on the highway offenses. So suppose you get caught to the, let's say, New York State Highway Patrol. They are not going to take for your phone or anything else. So they will immediately arrest you, right? So again, there could be abuses within that context, but this Sri Lankan level influencing is not possible the way it's structured. Each of the police officers have considerable amount of discretion on how they function within the given circumstances. And Anurali, do not forget the body cameras. Right now, with all these Floyd killings, etc., now the body cameras are becoming very frequent in all around the world, especially in US. It's very difficult because you can go to the police station and there's something called FOIA, right? You can request this body camera video and everything can be exposed. So there is a bit of a higher level of accountability in US when compared to Sri Lanka in terms of policing. But then again, there is a lot of abuses that I would like to focus later, even in the context of US.
Exactly. Well, no matter which country we take a focus at, there will be goods, bads, and the ugly, definitely in any context. But specifically to referring back to our specific structure that we have in place right now, historically, of course, we have seen our country overcome colonialism and other, of course, hardships as a nation. Has that in any way reflected back onto the institution that is the police?
I think not only on Sri Lanka but also in US, and I will show you in a bit of a comparative story here. So yes, right. So to maintain the law and order and to ensure that the people of this colonial nation was under the proper British law and order, the British established this policing system. Of course, even under the King's rule, we had officers like Vidanes, etc., within the lower ranks of the royal hierarchy. But this system, when compared to the traditions of the royalty or Canadian royalty, the British system has systematized and given a structure to a island-wide policing system once they got the total control of the country from 1815. And a big part of this system was to allow the colonizers, the British rulers, to ensure that majority of the people were kept under the control. Right? So, in fact, this is why you see in terms of for the policing, there was incredible amount of powers that were traditionally, historically exercised by the police over the years, right? And the culture of the policing in Sri Lanka, to some extent, maybe to a little extent, reflect certain colonial values. Of course, this system was created not only to contain law and order within the British rule, but to some point to subject the greater local population into some type of subjugation as well, right? Of course, this was done with, I would say, this dual or this dichotomy of motives. Similarly, if you look at the policing in US as well, a large part of the policing in US was created by these white Americans before the emancipation, right, to keep the blacks under subjugation. So in fact, one of the key motivations to establish these police divisions, and they have this sheriff officers, right, or sheriff deputy system, was to ensure that the blacks were kept into their places, and the fact that if you see a blacks like or a slave escape from one place to another, now this is where the sheriffs come and put them into their place. I mean, of course, there were other law and order motivations as well, but you could see racism within the US system. Of course, it's inherent for this, because innately the whole purpose of establishing this was that. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, you can see certain colonial hiccups have continued from the time of the British to now, right? Very much less now so, but certain practices have continued over the years, like beating up people still, right? This has, from the last 150 years, the police is practicing this kind of behaviors. And oftentimes, even people, I had a client, for example, who gotten slapped on his ear by the police, and I told, okay, let's go for a fundamental rights petition, and they said no. So I don't want to go for this because, if the police is beating me, I may have done something wrong, and I deserve to be beaten by the police. So sometimes these people in this country have a mentality that the police can do whatever they want. Right? So that, almost like that Serbian mentality of the people, because perhaps of, as we said, historical colonial certain hiccups, perhaps it also contributes for lack of accountability and responsibility in the policing.
Exactly. So historically, we have seen certain negative practices being reinforced by the community as well, regardless of the geolocation that we're talking about. I think the area that you mentioned towards the end of your response relating to how it's enforced by the general public as well, where there is some sort of norm that order will be enforced due to violence or violent tendencies of institutions that are meant to initially protect the people. Before we get into any of those specifics relating to how the community reacts to the police and how that interaction goes about, let's take a very short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We're in conversation with Dr. Udara Soysa, attorney at law. We were talking about police and Sri Lanka and also the global context as well. So up until this point, of course, thank you very much, Doctor, for actually explaining how the current system came to be through the historical experiences of certain countries. And I believe we touched on a very important point before we left off for the break, that is on how the general public expects to react to police and the institution in itself. I think it's important for us to go a little bit further than that and actually focus on community aspects of policing. Now, community policing is not something that the general public is perfectly aware of, because of course we expect a certain institution to enforce morals and law and order within the general public. So if you could explain to us how community policing works in Sri Lanka and also how it has developed alongside or parallelly across the globe.
Right. So before that, I want to touch on this one point that you stated in terms of how general public expect even a wider morality to be expected to be enforced by the police. This is complete nonsensical expectation of the people. Police cannot enforce morality. I remember perhaps 10-15 years ago, this concept of moral policing has taken its to like a apex level, where sometimes the police will in fact check pedestrians and motorcyclists' phones on whether they have this obscene or pornographic material. So they'll just randomly check and say, give me your phone, I want to check. So this kind of, and ultimately this is connected to some point with the community's expectations in terms of moral policing, because one of the key points is that police can only enforce what is in the black letter law, right? What is in the law books is that what police can to enforce. They cannot enforce the predominant moral values of the society on anybody. So that perhaps can be enforced through school systems or family system, or perhaps Sunday schools, religions, etc. Right? Okay. So getting back to this community aspects, I think the key issue in terms of rights and policing in Sri Lanka is the fact that people are not aware of their rights. And I think you have done several programs on fundamental rights with learned lawyers and president's councils in this program. So a lot of your audience probably well aware of this. So that too contributes to the breakdown of policing. Right? So people, as I said, right, I recently saw perhaps respond to a very gruesome crime of, I agree this crime is very gruesome. Right? There was a gruesome crime done by one accused, where a suspect has gotten into a house and killed people or raped, etc. allegedly, right? Horrendous crime. This person should meet the full wrath of the justice system. But I saw in the comment section hundreds of comments on this person should be taken to show weapons. And what is this like? The concept of showing weapons, etc., which is like, okay, police takes you to a scene of investigation and kills you, and ultimately claim that this was done in the defense as you were taken to show weapons and somehow the weapons were now found and you took a weapon and tried to shoot and the police shot. So obviously if you know that there are more than 20-30 cases of taking people to see weapons, you should have the policing in Sri Lanka should have a better system to ensure that people don't get killed, etc. So one of the key points that I want to reiterate is that people also have certain expectations, and these expectations in terms of gruesome violence and gruesome public execution by public officers of certain suspects, it starts this venomous and toxic cycle that I think which gets into the conscious of the police officers as well. So the police feel that okay, this person is irrefixable. So the solution would be to kill him off, bump him off. So this type of attitudes should be removed from the policing. Police do not have a right to execute anybody. In fact, police don't have a right to punish. The punishing should be done through the court system. But the police, in their subconscious, see their role as a punisher. And people also reinforce that with their warped attitudes in terms of policing, right? So, and remember, police officers are not aliens, right? It is police officers are also members of the society like everybody else. So you cannot, from a society that doesn't value rights, you cannot expect any other officer. So this whole the transformation is a spectrum transformation where everybody has to be transformed, not only the police departments.
Exactly. And also adding to this questions, when it comes to community policing globally in other countries as well, especially in neighboring countries like India and Pakistan, where we've seen a lot of moral conflict happening because of community policing coming into play and their primacy basically. How exactly do we compare in comparison to other countries' standards of community policing?
I think when you said community policing, you assume your premise is basically the community too is to some point to assist involved, and there is a bit of more liaison between the policing and the community. So I believe in my humble opinion, I think yes, to some extent perhaps maybe sharing intelligence, etc. But if when the police themselves are not trained in terms of respecting fundamental rights, getting community members in the process could be troublesome, because even the training that the police officers has experienced, these people, like normal people like you and I, we don't. However, I agree, in terms of community policing, in terms of where there is a better connection between the community and the police department, which I think is happening in several departments and I remember at maybe 15 or 16 years ago, I think Kolpiti police department, OIC used to have Kolpiti or Bumblepiti OIC used to have certain meetings between every Sunday or every Saturday. They have meetings with the neighboring people to hear about their grievances and so, which I think is the right way forward. When it comes now, since you spoke about India and Pakistan, I think when compared to those police departments, I think Sri Lankan policing is significantly better. I remember in 2012, I went to 2011, I went to one training in Singapore. There were several police officers who participated, and I remember this conversation with the superintendent of police in Pakistan, where he was telling me basically whenever he captured a suspect, he tied the suspect into these were back in the day Al-Qaeda suspects, right? So whenever he caught a Al-Qaeda suspect, basically he tied the suspect to the chair, tie him up and put the bomb under the suspect's chair, and he just goes, and then this would be a suicide death. So I think when compared to countries which face threats of terrorism like Pakistan, this puts the policing into a next level of brutality, and I think Sri Lanka have also seen, and I think a lot of cases now are coming, which are highlighting even in our country as well. But I think, in my opinion, Sri Lankan police is comparatively better when compared to Pakistan or Indian police forces. But I think where we should focus, maybe not the bottom, like in those countries, perhaps, maybe not so practical to compare ourselves with the European policing, or perhaps that may be something to look at. Also, I must also highlight about the salaries, etc. Like, Sri Lankan police salaries when compared to other countries, so low. In US, US, I have some friends who are in the certain police departments in US. Their salaries are perhaps $120,000 US dollars a year, with overtime, etc. So with medical insurance, with so many other benefits in US. So compare that with the peanuts that Sri Lankan police officers are getting, and look at, they do considerable hard work. I really want to applaud many of the police officers in Sri Lanka, often having salaries less than 75,000, less than 100,000, and still working day and night doing traffic, etc. when compared to getting US police officers, etc., getting huge amount of remuneration. So, of course, there are two sides to this, but I think key aspect of improving Sri Lankan policing is clearly you have to increase the salaries. One of the key reasons why you have police officers taking bribes is because they are unable to sustain themselves with the peanuts they are getting from the police department salaries. So the police department salaries, they have to increase. This is one of the root cause. American police need not getting any bribes, because anyway they are getting 120,000 US dollars, after tax, with all kind of benefits. So culture has to be understood.
Exactly. There has to be more of a conducive culture that allows policing to thrive in its ideal aspect, in order to ensure that the people that are joining with the police force can actually conduct their duty to the best of their capacity without external forces. I think there is an important area that I do want to pick on your previous response, relating to police brutality that you mentioned, that we have seen occurring across the globe, of course, regardless of location. We've seen it happen. Unfortunately, abuse of power is something that is almost unavoidable in the current context. How does Sri Lanka's police institution handle allegations of misconduct?
Okay, so if you are a victim of, it depends on who does this, right? You have the police commission, right? When it comes to the lower level, also you have a system where you can there is a police grievance center where you can, this is in English, it's called Sahana method, which you can go and put your grievances. Clearly, Human Rights Commission is available to you. Fundamental rights cases, these cases are not as time consuming as many people feel. So people who have been violated. So there are several tiers of remedies available for a victim of police brutality in Sri Lanka. In my experience, I think recently you see certain trends. Where people are more likely to take action against the police. I had a situation around 3 months or 6 months with one of the main police stations in Colombo. The officer was very, very bossy, loud, bullying even the lawyers. And we had to put a complaint to the ASP, and the OIC personally called and apologized. So you have this system where you can take certain action, but people, unfortunately, are not aware of these avenues. And often people feel, okay, these are very time consuming, but I encourage people, if you are a victim of police brutality, please go to Human Rights Commission. It's freely available for you. It's free of charge. You can go and put your complaint, right? Talk to a lawyer who's interested in not necessarily to benefit from you, but rather who are well known for their human rights protection to take action. Do not stay at home and expect that this is how things will be, because I understand there should be better remedies available, but within the financial resources available within the country, I think we have a workable structure. I think it's just that fine-tuning these structures to ensure the police brutality doesn't happen. But now, if you look at in US as well, you can see police brutality is quite prevalent now, because people have smartphones, etc. People can document. I know personally an activist called Sean Paul Reyes. He's a constitutional scholar in US, and he goes to the police stations and video record police action, sometimes to cover certain police brutality. And he himself get often arrested for having a camera. So you can see, and you can see, even US is claiming to be one of the beacons of democracies, and the fact that they have given so much power to the police now is backfiring on them, where the police in US is doing whatever they want, whenever they want. So in that sense, I think Sri Lanka, we despite our shortcomings, we have a system that can be better fixed, whereas in US it is more expensive and more time consuming, and I think pretty much impossible to fix this system, because there's a judgment called Terry versus Ohio, one of the, I think, worst cases in the US history, which lowers the standard, right, for a police officer in US to detain you. So if the police officer has any reasonable suspicion, he's able to detain you. And the fact is, if he's going to detain you, he can even put handcuffs on you, despite you are not going to be arrested. Even a detention will allow a US police officer to handcuff, sometimes to do certain searches, which in itself amount to abuses. So in my view, I think with correct leadership, correct people, correct fine-tuning of the mechanisms, I think Sri Lankan police can improve even better than the policing in US. I think, in my opinion, policing in US is also pretty much of a mess.
Exactly. Unchecked power always leads to some sort of unfairness against a specific minority.
Right, and adding to that, adding to that would be, because, like I said, it's the police officers have unlimited discretion in the streets, right? Whatever you do later in the courts, that's later, but at the street, they have a lot more power than Sri Lankan police officers. So this, as you said, power corrupts, as Lord Acton said, power corrupts absolute, and that is one of the biggest problems with US policing, 100%.
Exactly. And we do have to speak about, we just briefly touched on how exactly we can expect to fine-tune this system as well moving forward within our national context. We have to talk about future implications and also fundamental changes that we could expect to see as the general public moving forward from the police institution in Sri Lanka. Before we get into any specifics about fundamental changes for the future, let's take a very short commercial break. We'll be right back with the final segment. Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We're in our final segment in discussion with Dr. Udara Soysa, attorney at law. We were talking about police in Sri Lanka and also across the globe, and how our policing system actually compares to the rest of the world. Doctor, thank you very much for the previous two segments. I think our audience got a lot of key insights into how exactly we can compare and put our national institutions on a scale in comparison to other countries as well. And before we left off, we were talking about a very important area of unchecked power and also the amount of authority that is awarded to police officers and also the police in general in our country and abroad. I think we have to focus a little bit on the future implications as well. Moving forward, what do you expect to see in terms of changes nationally, sir, to our system that's in place?
I think first thing, one has to promote a culture, right? From Inspector General to the DIGs, one has to promote a culture at all ranks to ensure accountability. When you wear the uniform, when a police officer wears a uniform, they have to understand they are wearing not only the uniform but also wearing the public trust in them. So this is not an emblem for your superiority or to your power, your unlimited power, but this is rather a uniform of respect, right? And also responsibility. And until the culture changes at all levels of the police department, I think you'll continue to see abuses. So training, right, is important. Not only to catch the criminals or catch the bad people, but also training must be done within all ranks in terms of rights. Right? So these I usually get questions from the police officers sometimes saying, okay, when we catch a drug dealer, do you want us to to keep him in our lap, and to feed him milk? But this kind of responses I've gotten from police officers sometimes. But I mean I understand it is a tough task when we deal with criminals or suspected criminals, the better term. However, you can see globally there are better tools being developed than removing their nails to putting ballpoint pens in their ears, right? So I mean I understand it's horrendous as it looks, right? So these kind of torture techniques have failed. I'm not saying that we are actively doing it, but these are the practices that sometimes in other Asian countries and maybe during the earlier terrorist counter-terrorist times that perhaps some of our officers were also allegedly accused of. So my view is basically rather than focusing on torturing suspects to get information as needed, it is better that these new techniques that are readily available, I think now the FBI manuals, I think FBI, even compared to the US the national police systems, the FBI has developed certain techniques. I'm not talking about the CIA waterboarding, right? I'm talking about the FBI, certain techniques in where you can get certain information in certain other ways. Now, you should check on the Saddam Hussein's trial, where one FBI agent befriended Saddam Hussein for so many months, ultimately getting all the information that the prosecution needed to convict Saddam Hussein. Not by torturing Saddam Hussein, as Saddam Hussein did to his opponents, but rather through other psychological means, which of course I'm not talking about psychological abuses, but gaining the trust, etc. These can be done, right? So trying to use torture as a shortcut, I don't think will work, because too often when you torture somebody, of course for them to get the torture to be halted, you will confess to whatever. And as as per our law, confessions are not admissible, but then again you can build up a case around this and gather any other information connected to prove your case. But ultimately the culture of torture, the culture of hitting people, culture of slapping people, right, and culture of verbally abusing people and using filth, etc., when deal with suspected criminals has to be stopped. They have to be treated, and ultimately, yes, you have to punish them, and that's why we have to have a legal system. And also the police officers should also be very careful how they report facts, because I have seen in a lot of cases, the cases have collapsed because the police have not properly reported facts to the courts. And certain other situations, police intentionally not properly report facts because ultimately they want to see the case to collapse when it goes to trial 1 or 2 years later. So it's complex. It's a complex mess, But in my opinion, this complex mess can be straightened out with clear vision and a clear leadership.
Exactly. And also we have to talk about what you just mentioned right before we concluded on that specific area of the discussion, sir, relating to the legislative aspects and also judicial oversight that we see. Of course, the police is not an independently acting body. It's part of a network that is required to deliver justice to the people. How exactly does judicial oversight play into the entire policing aspect of the country?
Now, for example, if the police, at magistrate level, of course, they are accountable. For example, if they, the way, they report facts. I remember, I don't want to name, I remember in a Colombo area at a magistrate level, I remember one of the learned magistrates was so upset with how certain police officers were managing their behaviors in the courtroom. And I remember this honorable judge asked these police officers, if you want to do my job, you come here and sit and do the job. Right? So I'm just saying, so there is a certain level of judicial oversight, and fundamental rights is a wonderful way where the Supreme Court is able to keep a check on, and the current famous cases where the Supreme Court in fact intervene, to decide the course of the police department. So I think the judiciary has taken a proactive role, especially in the recent times where the need have occurred. However, I think ultimately the solution is not there at the judicial level, but I think the solution should not come up from the judiciary to the police department. Ultimately, can affect separation of powers. So I think the solution ultimately, Anuradhi, has to come within the police departments, where the culture, the norms, the values, the traditions have to take a radical shift to revolutionize the police department to become a more people's friendly and more human rights friendly and also more effective. Right? I often see people stating things such as police department in Sri Lanka, police can catch a criminal if they want to catch, which is true. Right? You can see the number of unsolved cases even today. So, and more training perhaps on that as well, and maybe certain foreign collaborations with other governments, especially with the Western agencies. I'm very happy to tell that I think the US Embassy and several other embassies are also helping, but then again, some might see a hidden hand in certain foreign intervention in there. So it's a complex system to reform, but we should strive for that.
Exactly. And moving forwards, a very important point that we couldn't touch on previously, which is on counterterrorism efforts by the police departments. How do we expect that to actually change moving forward into the future? Of course, having undergone so many traumatic terrorism events in our history in itself, how exactly can we expect that landscape to change?
Okay, so now if you see some of the discussions, the contemporary, the last 2 weeks, the discussion that are going, you can see that even with certain reports, how police officers were almost like single-handedly and targetedly criticized by certain commission members, where their negligence is borderline criminal offenses. So yes, police does or police should focus on counterterrorism. However, it should be done in a better coordinating manner. So often, because of, despite the centralized system, because of the hierarchy of the system, often the lack of communication between different departments can sometimes cause for horrendous terrorist attacks. So better coordination, right? Every officer, from the bottom up, top down, taking responsibility. And like I said, training to ensure the culture to be changed, and maybe bringing certain laws, right? Bringing certain laws which perhaps reforms the current legal structure on policing, and to add a duty of care in terms of police officers to prevent crime and prevent terrorism, and to ensure better coordination. I think you saw certain similar legislation with US, like Patriot Act in 2000. Now, for example, 2003, I believe, where you saw a lack of coordination between FBI, CIA, and the NYPD, which ultimately caused the 9/11 attacks. Right? They, in fact, which is actually quite interesting, like almost like parallel with our Easter attacks. Actually, I really recommend you, Anuradhi, or all my other audience to read the 9/11 Commission report, which is like quite big, which shows that how lack of coordination among the law enforcement structure can cause global change due to terrorism. So yes, so better coordination, different laws to ensure such coordination, laws to ensure better duty of care among police officers. So the legal framework has to be more fine-tuned as well.
Exactly. So moving forward, we can expect to see changes that will help better attune the police department towards the needs of the people, which is for protection and also for proper policing without brutality and unfair abuse of powers. Unfortunately, sir, our time here today has come to an end. Thank you very much, Doctor, for taking the time to enlighten our viewers on how exactly the policing system works and what exactly are the lapses and how we can expect it to change moving forward. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, Anuradhi, for having me in the show yet again.
All right, well, the police force of any nation has a duty to uphold in protecting its citizens first and foremost. We leave you tonight with the words of the former Prime Minister of Bulgaria, Todor Zhikov. The police belongs to the people and the people belong to the police. That's all we have for you tonight on Law, Land and Liberty. If you had missed any of today's programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube page, youtube.com/OtherDerana English. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.